Okay, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. We're up to a new parak. Okay, Yesh mutaris l'baleim. Here's the theme. Listen to this. There are certain women that are mutter to their husbands and they're also to the yavam. There's certain women who are mutter to the yavam and also to their husbands. There's certain women who are also to both, and there's certain women who are mutter to both. Why are we learning this parak here now? Let's begin with the Taisus. Taisus Peidalit. Stibra Masli Yesh Maisrais. Pirish Yesh Mutarais. Pirish Rav Yehuda Reb Yontif. The Kain Derech Hatana. La'acha Shepirish Halachais HaMesechta. After you go through a Mesechta and explain the Halachais, Chayze V'Shaynai Sam B'Lashon Katza. They go back and learn these Halachais B'Lashon Katza. Kidei Shiyu Mesudarim B'Yadcha U'Shmurim B'Peh U'B'Leiv. In order that they should be in order in your hands, in your minds, and in your hearts. So this is basically a mnemonic for many of the halachas that we learned in the Masechta Yevamot. So for all of us, it'll probably be like new material. But otherwise, it's a chazara of kind of concepts, and you'll see the chazara, you'll understand it. We are familiar on Manal Kain Gadol, Grushal Chizkel and Hedyet, very halala, all the very common halachas that we're accustomed to will be reintroduced to. So begin the new parak. Yesh mutaris l'balayim ve'asuras liyiv mehem. There are those who they're mutter to the husbands and also to the yavamim. Level 2, mutarim liyiv mehem ve'asurim l'balayim. They'd be mutter to the husbands, but they would be also to the mutter to the yavamim and also to the husbands. So the first ones they mutter to the husbands and also to the yavam, to the brother-in-law, and these they mutter to the brother-in-law and also to the husbands. Level 3, mutaris la'elu, you mutter for both, and level 4, vasuris la'elu, they're also to both. Ve'elu mutaris la'balayim, vasurim la'balayim. Going back over the first one, what's an example of a woman that's mutter to her husband and also to a yavam? Kayin hedyet shenaseh salmana. That's great. A kohen head is able to marry a mana, no problem. However, v'yeshle ach kohen gadol. He has a brother that's a kohen gadol. So it will be mutter to the husband and also to the yavam. Because if he would die and his wife the almana would fall in front of the kohen gadol, she wouldn't be permitted. The Gemara is going to ask, why does he have to marry her? Even if in other words, why do you have to consummate the marriage? Even if you fell as a basula, you would be asa. Because again, a kohen can't marry an almana. So why did the Mishnah have to learn shenasa that there was nesuin? Even without nesuin, it would be asar. Why? Because she's an almana. The fact that her husband died, so that would asar. Next, chalol shenasa kshera. A chalol that marries a woman is kasha. However, v'yeshle ach kasha. He has a kohen gadol. Let's say he has a brother. He had the same father. The father married one woman, so he's a kasha kayin. Married another woman, was a gerusha. So they're brothers, paternal brothers. One's a chalal because he was the product of the union of a kayin and a gerusha. So if he would be what? He can marry a regular woman, right? However, if he has an ach that is a kasha guy, he would not be able to marry this woman, because his relationship with this woman would make her into a chalala. Again, if a chalal marries a woman and lives with her, that passes the woman, right? For the brother who's a kohen can marry chalala. Yisrael shenasa bas Yisrael, v'yeshle ach mamzer. Yisrael is married to bas Yisrael, which is fine. He has a brother that's a mamzer, so it will be mutter to the husband and asa to the yavam. Mamzer shenasa mamzeres, v'yeshle ach Yisrael. A mamzer that's married to a mamzeres, and he has a brother that's a Yisrael, so it'll be mutter to the husband and asa to the yavam. So those would be cases of all mutter to the husband and asa to the yavam. What's the case that's mutter to the husband and asa to the yavam? Mutaris levadeim basurus liyavemim. Ve'elu mutaris liyav. Those are ve'elu mutaris liyavemim basurus liyavemim. Which are the cases they're mutter to the yavam and not to the husband. Kohen gadol shekidush es almana, kohen gadol that gave kiddushin to an almana, v'yeshle ach kohen hedyet. Now let's go through this. He's a Kohen Gadol. Can he marry an almana? Absolutely not. He has a brother that's a Kohen Hedyot. Now, be medayik the lashon, guys. It says shekidesh, not shenasa, because if the Kohen Gadol did consummate the marriage, she would be asa to the Kohen Hedyot as well as a chalala. So it has to be that shekidesh, he only gave her kesef kedushin, but did not go ahead and have physical relations with her. So in this case, it will be asa to the husband and mutter to the yavam. Another case, kasha shenasa chalala. So she's asa, a kohen that's kosher, and marries a chalala, that's no good. V'yeshle ach chalal. He has a brother that's a chalal. So it will be asa to the husband, but mutter to the brother, because a chalal can marry a chalala. Yisrael shenasa mamzeres, that's asa. V'yeshle ach mamzer, that'll be mutter. Mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael is asa. V'yeshle ach Yisrael. So that would be mutter. The woman is asa to her husband because the husband's a mamzer. She would be permitted to the yavam because the yavam's kosher. So all of these cases, mutaris liyaveim asun lavalayim. The elu asuras le'elu le'elu. These are cases that they're asa for both. The elu asuras le'elu le'elu. Kohen gadol shenasa es almana. A kohen gadol that consummates the marriage with almana. V'yesh le'ach kohen gadol or kohen hedyot. Even a kohen hedyot would be asa because she will be a halala v'balt the kohen consummated the marriage. Kasha shenasa chalala v'yesh ach kasha. A kasha kohen marries a chalala, and he has a brother that's kosher, so they be asa to both because neither one can marry a chalala. Yisrael shenasa mamzeres v'yesh ach Yisrael. Right? You have a mamza marries a kosher Jew, marries a mamzeres, and has a brother that's a kosher Jew. The mamzeres is asa on both. Mamza shenasa bas Yisrael, v'yesh ach mamza. Mamza marries a bas Yisrael and has a brother that's a mamza. Asuris la'elu ve'elu, right? The bas Yisrael can't marry the mamza and can't marry the brother who's a mamza. They also to both. V'shar kol hanashim mutaris labaleim ulivmeim, and all the other women would be permitted to their husbands and to the yav. Okay. In Daf Chaf Aleph, we had a very, very long chart of the Shniyas La'aroyos, right? The classic, let's stay with one because there were many, is Aim Imoy. Aim Imoy is your grandmother. Your grandmother is only asa to you because it's your mother's mother. Aim Imoy, that's asa. Good? That would be a Shniyah La'aroyos. Shniyah B'derei Seifim, Shniyah L'Bavle, Shniyah L'Yavam. Let's say it was a Shniyah to the husband and not a Shniyah to the Yavam. Then a Surah L'Bal, Umuteres L'Yavam. She'd be asa to the husband and mutter to the yavam. In other words, let's say you had the paternal brothers, but one of them had an aim imoy, but they had different mothers. So it would be a shnia to the husband, to the baal. But for the yavam, it would be permitted because there's no connection whatsoever. So therefore, it would be permitted. Shnia liyavam le shnia lebaal, then a sur liyavam muteres lebaal. The same thing in the opposite direction. Shnia lezel lezeh, a sur lezel lezeh. Ein loy. Now, ein lo, a shnia la'aroyes is dirabanan, and because it's dirabanan, they were very machmir. So, ein lo loy ksuba. Someone goes ahead and marries a shnia, she doesn't get a ksuba. For loy peris, she would not get peris, meaning he wouldn't have to nichse miloig. If he nichse miloig, right? Usually, peris from nichse miloig, he doesn't have to make up. She would. I don't think. How did Rashi learn over here? I'm just forgetting a second. He doesn't have to pay from what he ate. Usually the Rabbanan, usually you have to pay. Usually they made a gezerah, fellas, that the reason why the kohen, one more time, nichse miloig, she brings into marriage, he uses the estate. He gets the payris. Really, he should have to pay for the payris. The reason he doesn't pay for the payris is in case she gets captured, it'll be paid to her. In the case of a Shnei L'Aroyes, he doesn't have to be paid to her. So since he doesn't have to be paid to her, he doesn't have to redeem her from captivity. Therefore, what? She will not get payris. Not be supported from the estate. The clothing that he takes from the Maloig and he uses and he wears it out, she wouldn't get the difference between new clothing and the worn clothing. Vlad kasha, but the Vlad born from this union is kasha. The koy from the solo haitzi, and you would force him to get divorced. This is all when you over the rabbanon of marrying a shnil aroyas. Amonul kain gadol grusha chutz kain hedyet mamzeres l'sin Yisrael. These are all Bas Yisrael l'sin l'mamzer all chiyuvim chavilavim yeshlem ksuba. Right? The chachamim did not go ahead and they weren't over on the takanas of chachamim. Therefore, they would get a ksuba. They would get a ksuba. This will be explained in the Gemara. Going over the specific cases. So the first case we had was what? Was a kohen hedyet. Kohen hedyet. He said that a kohen hedyet that marries an almana and he has a brother that's a kohen gadol. Says the Gemara, my area tani nasa, listen to Kiddush. Why did you learn that the kohen hedyet married an almana, even though he's mekadesh an almana? I don't know. Something got my throat. Fellas, but the kohen gadol, the kohen hedyet is mekadesh and almana. Doesn't consummate the marriage, correct? And consequently dies. And he has a brother that's a kohen gadol. We had a Gemara earlier that we don't say asay dochalos asay. Say yibum is dochalos asay of what? Of almana. There's a shver Rashi over here. But going to be a Rishonah to be a Shniya. So Fred the Gemara Kasha, why to illustrate the case that it's mutter to the husband and also to the Yavam was where he was Nasa, where he consummated the marriage. I feel he didn't consummate the marriage. If he just married her and did Kedushin, it would be a case of mutter to the husband and also to the Yavam. My area the Tani Nasa, why do you say that the Kohen Hedyet married the Almana, listening Kiddush? Learned that he gave a kedushin, and that would have been enough to aser on the kohen gadol brother. If he just gave a kedushin. In other words, if he was nasa, there was two reasons why. There's an asay of a chalala, of an almana, and there's an asay of a basula, because it's not a basula anymore. They ain't essay dochalos asay vasay. Abel kiddush, but the act of kedushin. I'd say asi essay say that the essay of what of yibum is say of what of almana, and there was no consummation of the marriage, she'd be a basula, but kula pirka the whole perik essay velos essay who v'yasi essay v'dochalos essay. We don't say, for example, guys, that a person can marry a mamza because a mamzeres because the asay of yibum is dochalos asay of mamzeres, right? You don't say that. You don't say that. So obviously that can't be the reason. So yes, then we're a strong question. By the case of kohen hedyet nasa getting married, why do you have to say he married her? Just say he was makadesha. And for the Gemara, we want to be consistent in style. Mishum tekaboy lemisnei seifa kohen gadol shenasa es almana. A kohen gadol married an almana, and he has a brother who's a kohen gadol or a kohen hedyet. Now, there would be asur on both. Dafka nasa deshavi chalala. Dafka, if he consummated the marriage, then it will be asur on both. Asur on the kohen gadol, she's an almana, and asur on the kohen hedyet because she's a chalala. And over there, you dafka had to learn nasa to make her a chalala. Of course, if it was kiddush, she won't be a chalala. Aval kiddush sharyale, so tananami reisha nasa. So therefore, for consistency, the ratio of the sefer, we learned nasa. Fred the Gemara, by the Tani, yeah.
In the previous case where he married the almana, what difference does it make if he had be with her or not? She's already not a basula, she's an almana from someone else.
Well, how do you know? I'm saying because she could have been from Erison.
I mean, she was an almana from Erison too.
Yeah, she could have been.
Okay.
By the Tani Mishum Sefer, listening Mishum Mitziyasa, when you jump to guys, there's three cases here. You want one to be consistent with three. and therefore you learn nasa. Why don't you learn one should be consistent with two and learn kiddush? Listening to Shemitziasa, Kohen Gadol shekiddush es almana, a Kohen Gadol who gave kiddushin to an almana, v'yesh le ach Kohen hedyet, that will be mutter then, right? It will be mutter in that case. It will be asa to the Kohen Gadol es almana. It will be mutter to the Kohen hedyet because why she's not a chalala. So why did you jump from one nasai to three nasai? You could have learned one kiddush up to two kiddush. In other words, you have three cases. The first case you said nasha, and the third case you said nasha. In the middle case you said kiddush. If you would have said kiddush in the first case, it would have been the same halacha. Kohen hedyet, the Kohen hedyet because the head is mekadesh an almana. It will be asa. She's a basula. It will be asa to the Kohen Gadol. So why you learn nasha because of the sefer case number 3? Learn kiddush because of case number 2, where the Kohen Gadol was mekadesh almana. It's mutter to a Kohen hedyet. Ela mishum bas buksa. The reason because it's friend next door. The Ketani, the misli chalol shenasa kshera. Time with the nasha, the shavi chalala. Aval kiddush shari lei mishum haki Ketani nasha. Guys, look back at the Mishnah. Count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Kohen hedyet shenasa es almana v'yesh le ach Kohen Gadol. Now, for the Gemara kasha, why do you have to learn the case of the Kohen hedyet that married the almana? Learned he just was mekadesh the almana. It would have done the same thing. It would be asa to a Kohen Gadol. Look at the next line. Kohen Gadol chalol shenasa, a chalol that marries a kashera. V'yesh le ach kasha. So she would be what? She'd be. In that case, she'd be only asa to the, she'd be asa to the, over there, nasha kshera. If she would be kiddush, she would be kasha. It's only because nasha is a challah that marries a good woman, right? The only way this kshera becomes asa on the yavam is because she's a chalala. So therefore, in this case, you had to learn nasha. You couldn't learn kiddush. If a chalal's mekadesh a woman and dies, it will be mutter to his brother who's a kohen. It's only because nasha, he lived with her, that render a chalala, that it's asa to the kohen hedyet. So this case, the body of the first case had to be nasha. So we learned in the first case nasha, even though we could learn kiddush. Again, one more time. Kohen hedyet shenasa salmana. I learned kiddush, and for the Gemara, because the next case has to be nasha. This case we learn nasha for consistency. Chalol shenasa kshera v'yesh le'ach kasha. Then it's going to be what? Aser on the yavam. Why is it going to be aser on the yavam? Right? He's mutter to the husband because of course a kshera can marry a chalal. It's going to be aser on the yavam because what? It is a chalala. And this would only be nasha and not kiddush. Let's see it inside again one more time. Ela mishum bas buksa. We learned the case of Kohen hedyet shenasa because of chalal shenasa. The Ketani, the Kabbalah misli, because you had to learn chalal shenasa kshera time with the nasha. The reason is because he married her, the shavi chalala, which made her into a chalala. Aval kiddush, but if he was mekadesh her and didn't live with her, sharile, she'd be permitted to the brother Kohen hedyet. Mishum hachi Ketani nasha. Therefore, by Kohen hedyet, who married an almana, even though you could learn kiddush, we learned nasha. Well, my area diktani almana by Kohen hedyet shenasa almana, right? Listening besula. Why do you have to say that he learned that he married an almana, even if he married a basula? In the first case, Kohen hedyet shenasa almana is mutter to almana. Is mutter to a Kohen hedyet that marries an almana. It's mutter to the husband and also to the brother that's a Kohen Gadol. Yes, guys, let's focus. Again, the words sound the same. Kohen hedyet marries almana, no problem. He dies, it's a problem if watch is going to go ahead and marry a Kohen Gadol. Take out the almana part. What about this thing? Kohen hedyet shenasa kshera. A Kohen hedyet marries a kshera. Shekidesh es a kshera. And he dies. So now she becomes almana from this marriage and therefore can marry Kohen Gadol. Why did you have to say he married an existing almana? Why didn't you say he married a regular woman? And Memela, she's an almana when he dies. The whole case of Yibam was when the brother dies. So why did I need the brother marrying an almana to create this case? Even if you married a basula and died, it would create the case because she'd be an almana automatically by his death. It's a great kasha. Guys, the Mishnah says, Kohen hedyet shenasa es almana. A Kohen gadol that marries almana is mutter to the husband and asa to the yavam. Even if she was an almana, even if she was a regular woman, and she's still a basula, should be asa to Kohen gadol, because she's an almana as soon as he dies. As I read the Gemara. Diktani almana, listening basula, amid beis. The chitema, if you're going to say, kasava haitana. Nesuin harishonim apilin. It's the nesuim harishonim. In other words, you go back to her original state. You go back to the original state. No, if it would have said basula, she wouldn't have been an almana. In other words, nesuin harishonim apilin. In other words, you don't look at the death of the husband. Look at her state when she got married. So if he married almana, she's an almana. But if she married a basula, good, he died, but she's the basula. Here's such a svara, guys. In other words, I'm going to view her status based upon the marriage of the brother, not based upon the death of their brother. So if the brother married an almana, she's an almana. But if he married a basula, then she'd be a basula, and then she'd be mutter to kohen gadol. It's the state, the original nisuin. What the brother did was causes that to fall in front of the avam. Hari cholol shenasa kshera, a cholol shenasa kshera who marries a kosher woman. V'lo yamina nisuin harishonim apilin. And we don't say that of nisuin rishonim that she's a kshera that it's mutter. A cholol, guys, a cholol that marries a kshera is fine, but she can't marry what? The kohen hedyet, because she's a chalala. So we don't say, one second, let's look at the status before he lived with her. If you're going to tell me, look at the status before he lived with her, then the kohen hedyet would be able to marry the woman, because she was kashera at the time when the brother married her. A chalol marries kashera is no problem. Guys, there's no problem there. What's the problem? When he dies and she falls in front of the brother, and she's a chalala because she lived with a chalol. If you can look at the Nitsun Rishonim, she should be muta, because we'll say she was a kshera. Eli, you don't say that. So who adin by almana, you don't say that. Therefore, let's learn the case. A kohen hedyet that married a basula and dies, it's asa to the yavam and muta to him. Why do you learn almana? It says, okay, here vadai, we learned almana because of the seifa. Mishum the Gabai limisnei seifa, you had to learn the seifa, kohen gadol shenasa es almana, v'yesh le'ach kohen gadol kohen hedyet. Dafka almana would asur on a kohen hedyet. Ava basula chaz yolei to the kohen hedyet. Mishum hachi ketani almana. In other words, this clearly is because of symmetry in the Mishnah. Really, the first case, kohen hedyet could have married a basula. It would be mutter to the husband and asur to the kohen gadol. The reason why we learned almana is because the latter case, a kohen gadol that marries an almana and consequently dies and has a brother that's a kohen gadol or a kohen hedyet, and over there clearly had to be an almana, because if she was a basula, it'd be mutter to kohen hedyet. So therefore, you learned almana therefore you learned almana. But basula would be chazik to the kohen hedyet, and therefore we learned almana. Of course, now she's a chalala. Since she's kohen gadol, it's an almana, it's chalala, it's also even on the kohen hedyet. Maskula papa. Now, this is, guys, let's do this outside. We had a Gemara earlier about a mitzri. We know that a mitzri rishon is not allowed in, mitzri sheni is not allowed in, mitzri shlishi is. And it's a lav habo mechalasei. You can't marry a one and a two, because it says you can only marry a three. So we infer, if I can only marry a three, I can't marry a one and a two. Now we had a shaila. What happens if, who do you go after, the mother or the father? The father's a two and the mother's a one. What's the child? So if let's say the child's a two. For our purposes, the child's a two. Good? Our purposes, the child is a two. So now let's say you have a guy who's a two. So you're going after the mother. A guy's a mitzri, he's a two, he marries a one and a two, and he has two kids. So now he has one kid that's a two and one kid that's a three. Again, he's a two, he's marrying a one and a two. So the one that he married a one, The child's a 2, can't come in. Child married the 2 is a 3, and that child could come in. Good? So now, in this case, you have the 4 scenarios of the mutter to the husbands and asa to the yavam, or mutter to the yavam and asa to the husband, mutter to both, or asa to both. So, for example, if she has she has a sheni and he has a child that's a shlishi, so the sheni would marry a sheni. That's guys. The sheni marries a sheni, and the shlishi marries the Israelis. That's okay. Good. Outside. Really, I should have maybe made this a chart, but I didn't. Okay, guys, listen. So let's say the 2 marries a 2, and the shlishi, the brother, marries a Yisraelis, which he could. So that would be the case. It'd be mutter to the husbands and also to the yavam. The 2 is married to the husband, but the 2 can't marry the 3. The 3 is married to Israelis, but the Israelis can't go back to the 2. So it'll be mutter to the husbands and also on the yavam. Well, okay, now let's say the sheni marries a shlishi, the opposite. A sheni marries a shlishi, and a shlishi marries a sheni. It'd be mutter to the yavam and us and the husbands, because a sheni is not supposed to marry a shlishi, and a shlishi is not supposed to marry a sheni, right? So therefore, it'll be mutter to the yavam, but it'll be us to the husbands. Let's say they marry giyoris, it'd be mutter to both. Let's say they marry an islandess, it will be usher on both. An islandess, let's say a sheni marries an islandess. So it's usher to the shlishi, because he has to be able to do yibum, and he can't do yibum. And it will be usher, the islandess is a full-fledged Yisraelis, so she can't marry a sheni, a mitzvah. So the Gemara's kasha is, if I have this case, this possibility, why didn't the Mishnah include this case? I can have the 4 scenarios by a case of a mitzvah sheni marrying a rishon and a sheni and creating the 4 scenarios. So the Gemara is going to answer, ton of Vishaya. We learned cases, but we didn't learn all the cases. We left, and the Gemara always asks, my shaya, the high shire. Why did you leave out that you could have included? Gemara says, we leave out Petsuadaka. We leave out the case of a Petsuadaka. Petsuadaka, we know of someone who's cannot have children for various physical reasons. So if a Petsuadaka would marry a Yisro and has a brother who's kasha, again, a Petsuadaka, regular, he's not allowed to marry, so it'll be asa to the husband and mutter to the yavam. She's a Yisraelis, she can't marry the husband, but the brother's a normal guy, it'll be asa to the husband and mutter to the yavam. Okay. What about if it's a kasha guy with a kasha girl, and the brother is a psuadaka, so it will be kasha to the husband and asa to the yavam. Or if it's psuadaka Yisrael with a brother's psuadaka, it would be asa on both. Let's say it's a psuadaka and a giyaris, then it'll be mutter to both. So since we could have learned that, we didn't. So we left out what? Mitzri sheni. That's what they're saying. Says the Gemara inside. Maskler Papa. Emisa lahad dechiyaser Rabdimi Amrab Yochanan Mitzri sheni shenatza mitzvah rishayna b'na sheni. You're going to go after the woman. So if a sheni marries a rishayn that Charles a sheni, have a listening nami, then you could have learned in our Mishnah also Mitzri sheni shenasa shnei mitzriyos achas rishayna v'achas shniya v'hoyelu banim rishayna b'sheni. If they marry normally, meaning the sheni marries a sheni and the shlishi marries a Yisraelis, mutaris lebad lehem, they'd be mutter to the husband, basuras liyavehem. The epuch, and if they go switch it around, they mistakenly or they do the wrong thing, where a sheni marries a shlishi and a shlishi marries a sheni, then mutaris liyavehem, they'd be mutter to the yavam because that's the right one they should have married. Basuras lebad lehem. Mutaris le'elu be giyaris, asur le'elu be islandess. So therefore, why didn't you learn this case? And if Gemara Tana Shaya, we could have, but we left out another case. My Shaya, the high Shaya B'tsuadaka. Left out B'tsuadaka. Again, B'tsuadaka also you have all 4 cases. Says no, Imishim B'tsuadaka lav shiura. If you're learning B'tsuadaka, that's not a leftover. B'tsuadaka we also could have learned. The Tani Lei Chayav Elavim. Because the Mishnah included a case of Chayav Elavim, Mamza, Kain Hedyet, Kain Almana. We have a bunch of cases of Chayv Lavim. Included in those cases of Chayv Lavim would be what? Would be Suadaka. And therefore we have a question, why didn't you learn Mitzri? Says the Gemara, Mila Ketani Vahada Tani. Then we learned Chayv Elavim and learned them again. Vakatani Koyin Hedyet Shenasa Almana v'Cholol Shenasa Kshera. So you learn, guys. You learn Koyin Hedyet Shenasa Almana, and then you repeated a case of Chayv Elavim. Cholol Shenasa Kshera, and makes her a Chalala. That's Chayv Elavim. So you see, you did, even though you learned Chayv Elavim, you repeated it. So who then it's not a share of, you should repeat it of Suadaka. I need it's not a share. I needed that for the Kiddush. Lashminon could have Yudam Arav. Then Rav Yudam Arav, like Huzru Ksheris Leinasi L'Psuin. A Kohenes is able to marry a Chalol. A Chalol can marry, a Chalol is asa to marry a Kohen, but a Kohenes, a Bas Kohen, could marry what? A Chalol. Vakatani Chalol Shenasa Kshera, Yisrael Shenasa Bas Yisrael, V'yeshle Ach Mamza. So again, if you're telling me that the Chayv Elavim was included, so why did you go ahead and repeat the case by Mamza? And therefore, you should have listed Suadaka as well. And since it's not a leftover, then it says it's also a chiddush over here. You have a lav that's not equal by a chalol. So that's why we repeated it. But it's not a share. It says and therefore you repeatedly say Yisrael Shnasa Mamzeres v'yesh le'ach Yisrael. So therefore what? Therefore it's extraneous, and therefore I could have left it out. Allah Shmamina a ton of b'shaya. I learned and I left out Shmamina. I left out Suadaka as well. And Shmamina there I left out what? The case of mitzvahs. I'm gonna stop over here and Bez Hashem tomorrow.